What is up, guys? So, we're back with the Cosmere Quest. This week is going to be chapter 3-9 of Elantris, and I am excited to get into some stuff. Last week, I was terrible at keeping to a shorter video. I think we went like 20-something minutes. I'm going to try to trim that down a little bit, but I make no promises because there's a lot to talk about today. I'm pretty excited to get into it. I kind of read at a little bit slower pace, glacial pace, if you will, and yeah, it's gonna take me a minute to unpack everything that I have on my mind. As you can tell, all these like brain farts and stuff that are happening. So before we get to that, if you are a first-time watcher of Kyle's Cosmere Quest, go sign up for the newsletter if you haven't already at the legendariumpodcast.com. It's free. This is where that content is going to appear as quickly as possible. We're doing one a week, and they'll probably be released a little bit later outside of the newsletter. But if you want to get it on top of it, sign up for the newsletter. It's free, and there's a lot of other cool supplemental stuff that Craig throws in there. So do it. Make it happen. Or feel free to follow the conversation on Reddit or join our Discord channel. I'm asking for questions, soliciting advice on reading tips and things like that as we go through Sanderson and the whole Cosmere. So join us. Do it. So before we jump into chapters 3-9, I want to answer a couple of quick questions or to basically just respond to a couple responses of yours. Gary, maybe Jerry? Gary? Thanks for subscribing, man. I appreciate it. I am excited to hopefully unpack a little bit more, maybe get a little more in depth. Like I said, you're going to get just what's in my brain and hear my thoughts and agree or disagree. It is what it is. Feel free to continue the conversation. I appreciate it. And then Little Red Book responded with something I had to say in the last video. He said, or she said, they said, the religion versus religion and religion versus state things are so great in this book, and I can't wait for my reaction. Good to know. I'm excited to get into it. And then we, talked a little bit about the word pagan and word choice last week, and Little Red Book brings up a pretty good point about, I'm not sure what other word Sanderson would use without getting into spoilers. So appreciate that. I think context is really helpful. Like I said, I'm just kind of giving you vibes on what pulls me out of it or what things trigger my brain as we go. But I appreciate the context there. I think the idea that they bring up about sometimes when you're reading fantasy, there's a balance between like shorthand of English or what we're used to hearing and what we kind of make associations with, and then the obscure made-up word in fantasy, the new language or whatever, and there's a balance to go there, and we'll talk about that balance in a little bit because there's definitely a scale here in this book that I think is tipping one way, but I think that's a really good call out that pagan can just be used as unbeliever and we're good to go. Like I said, my brain triggered and thought I'd share it. So it's funny. I agree with your idea that like it kind of saves from Captain Expository or Captain Exposition coming out if you use familiar wording and not make up every single word. And we'll get to Captain Exposition in just a minute because we found him in Elantris. So thanks for responding. I appreciate the engagement. Let's keep the conversation going as we get through and into these things. Again, Reddit, Discord, join the newsletter. You can comment on YouTube, all that fun stuff. I'm trying to compile everything and make a quick recap at the first of these videos. So let's get into it. Like I said, I'm splitting these up 3 chapters, or the way that Sanderson split it up is every 3 chapters we've got characters. We'll focus on a different character, so I'm going to split it up the same way. So let's talk about Raoden for a second. A couple things top of mind that stood out to me. We get a lot more information about Elantris in these next couple of chapters that follow Raoden. We get Galadon. We find out that he's only been there for a couple months, actually, and a lot of people only last at least before they become like zombies and can't really function and just sit there and moan and wail for the rest of eternity. Most people don't last super long. And it's found out that Galadin's actually only been there for a couple months, and he's the one leading us through, which I thought was cool. People can't die or kill themselves, really. I mean, they just basically suffer. That sucks. Can we talk about one thing real quick? It's happened several times already. Like I said, we're up through chapter 9. Tangent. Fantasy cursing. This is something that's come up quite a bit, and I don't know that it has the same effect that's intended yet. And maybe that's just because I'm not as familiar with the world and I'm not as familiar with the religions and the context yet, but there have been several different types of cursing that's come up. This happens in a lot of different fantasy, but huge eye roll as it's happened in this book so far, as they, Edis Domi or whatever it was that they were saying. It just doesn't have that same effect to me. I think that's a crutch that a lot of fantasy writers go for, and I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the familiarity with language or something that we know and the made-up fantasy word, and there's a disconnect there. And I just don't think it carries the weight that it's intended to at this point. And maybe I'll change my mind on that later as I get a little bit more familiar with the religions and the characters themselves. But there's a lot of random cursing that happens in here, and almost all of it has fallen flat so far for me. So we learn a little bit more about Elantrians in these chapters with Raoden and Galadon, about how a lot of these like gangs and these thugs are actually hesitant to fight because of the toll that it takes. So the idea that like they kind of roam around in packs and intimidate, but like if you are about to put up a fight against them, a lot of the times they won't actually engage because it might not be worth you landing like this lucky blow or whatever. And let's say you got 3 guys cornering you for whatever, food or whatever it is they're trying to steal from you, and you accidentally break their nose. Well, their nose is broken forever, and they don't want that. So kind of the idea of like the best defense is a good offense, of being aggressive, is kind of what I'm feeling here. And it's pretty interesting. You see Raoden be really aggressive with some things in a couple chapters after that, especially as he goes into recruiting newcomers, and they go and they get the new guy and they take him up to the rooftop and they run away, and it's obvious that the gang is chasing after them and want the food and all of that. But it's just an interesting dynamic to me that could come into play later on both sides. So is Raoden going to have to make a decision to fight or flight? And what are the consequences of that beyond what we normally perceive them to be? So I really like that detail. Let's talk about the 3 gangs for a second. So I thought that was pretty cool. I think the way that it's divvied up, it makes a lot of sense that there's like these 3 different territorial kind of gangs that are going on in Elantris, and their leaders kind of take different mentalities on what to do and how to get people to follow them. I'm calling it right now. I think Raoden's going to have to connect with Karata. I don't know how to pronounce it. Again, pronunciations. I think he's going to connect with her and figure out how to escape. We got a lot of information about how she's escaped a few times, and in fact specifically escaped to the palace, Raoden's old home, and I think that's going to happen. He's going to have to. She's supposedly not super approachable, doesn't want you in her territory. Somehow I don't know if he's building up enough people with the newcomers that he's going to start recruiting or what, but he's going to meet up with her. He's going to figure out how to sneak out of Elantris, and shit's going to go down. That's my prediction for what's going on there. I'm really digging the Aeons. And I love the idea that Galadon has like this secret stash of knowledge with all of these books. It was really interesting. I thought at first, because they had talked about how they had figured out that books were edible, and so people were just eating them because of the hunger. And Raoden was kind of like this whole. It actually kind of pissed me off, his whole holier than thou attitude towards the people suffering. Like, how could you eat these books? There's so much knowledge in there. The Elantrians have all of this history and knowledge, and they're the only ones. And it just hasn't clicked for him yet. The starvation drive of what he's into now. You know, the life that he's into now, and these people that have been suffering this whole time. So that was kind of bugging me. But then when we got to Galadon's like secret lair with all of the books, I thought for sure that was like his food storage. But then, come to find out, he's actually trying to dig through and learn either how to use the magic, uncover what happened, basically figure out a way to use these aeons and use that magic and understand it more. And as of right now, they're just basically like human sparklers, and they can like write their name in the air, and there you go. But I'm really excited that his drive is more than just survival within the walls of Elantris. It's also, let's figure out how to do something about it. And Raoden's latched onto that, and you know, two people can read faster than one. So super stoked to find out what's going on there. I think my opinion's changed a little bit from Raoden from last week. I'm starting to like him a little bit more. It's a little bit refreshing to see him just kind of go with his own idea right off the bat, and like, I'm gonna recruit these people, and it was kind of cool. It was unsuspected. So digging that. I'm excited to see how we go forward from there, and I like that we're starting to see the characters interact with each other from the different arcs, even on a small scale where, you know, they're on the roof and they're looking up and they see Hrathen and they see Sarene. They don't know that that's them, but they see a group of people up there, and so there's subtle interactions that are happening from Elantris to the I want to say the outside world, or maybe the inside world. I don't know. Yeah. So let's get over to Sarene. This is probably the one I have the most to say about. I know that I just rattled off for like 10 minutes, but yeah. I'm really digging the Sarene chapters. I think that I'm getting more information out of the Sarene chapters than out of the other two character arc chapters so far. Part of that is because we have uncovered our Captain Exposition, which is Lukel. And, well, there's two of them actually. There's Lukel and then there's Galadon, and they're the ones that are just pumping us full of information, but it's way more obvious with Lukel's character than with Galadon's character. One of the things, I remember I took a creative writing class in college, and one of the things my professor talked about is you gotta find yourself a Hermione Granger when you're writing a story. And what she meant by that was you find somebody that can info dump for you, that can give you that exposition, and you try to do that in a natural way. I don't want to say that this was done poorly, but it was done in a very obvious way. I mean, we got like 3 or 4 continual pages of Lukel's dialogue, basically just laying out the history, which was super helpful for context, but also about halfway through, I was like, okay, I'm just getting a huge info dump on me, and I don't know how I feel about it. That probably sounds super critical, but it's all very important information, and I think it was done well, but it was very obvious to me the objective that was happening from a writing standpoint. Again, not to say that it's bad, but there it is, our Captain Exposition. And like I said, Galadon does that on a smaller scale, but still, that's what his character's purpose is to teach the reader what the hell is going on. Couple things with Sarene's character. I'm not quite sure I understand her motivations just yet, and I especially didn't understand them until maybe chapter 8. and they seem a little shoehorned in there, and it's probably because I don't understand the backstory of Teo and the church and the different political rivalries and what's driving her necessarily to pick fights with Hrathen out of nowhere. That's kind of what it feels like right now, and maybe I just missed that. So if I'm missing something, please feel free to call me out on it. But it feels this feud that's happening, although super super interesting, and I'm digging it because I love like these conversational chess pieces that are being moved around, and I love the fact that Hrathen and Sarene are acknowledging how well the other one is maneuvering, kind of like live on scene. They both at different points have had that inner dialogue of like, well played, and I love that, and it's super interesting. I'm just not quite sure I know why she's poking the bear just yet. It feels a little contrived and rushed, but it's super interesting. So as soon as I get that why, and maybe I just missed it, I bought in on this 100%. It just, I found myself as she was asking questions during his sermon, I found myself thinking, why is she doing this though? So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Super excited to get into that. Like I said, that's probably the most interesting portion of the book for me so far. In a similar vein, the scene between the king and Hrathen, when we first see Hrathen speak to the king and he's kind of going over his merchant papers and stuff like that, it felt really rushed to me. And I think that now in hindsight, after I had gotten a few more chapters in, it makes a little bit more sense. But as I first read it, I was really surprised at how dismissive and almost super caricature-y the king feels. That he was just basically didn't hear a word that Hrathen had to say. I think this is just somewhat of Sanderson's style of, I'm going to just throw you in here, good luck, catch up, sink or swim. Not a bad way to do it, but a jarring way to do it. And I'm catching up after the fact on some of these things where questions came up or things hit me and I was like, wait, what? This feels super out of nowhere. This guy's being super dismissive. What's going on? And now I'm slowly catching up as things start to kind of peel back in hindsight. I don't know that I would catch that as easily if I weren't taking notes for these videos. So something to consider, at least in my own mind. You know, how do I feel about that? We'll see. Couple of things that stood out, just kind of random one-off things. I talked about last time about the pronunciations and the use of AO and all this stuff. I realized that it feels very Korean influenced, especially where they're eating and the type of food that they're eating. It feels very Korean, and turns out Brandon Sanderson went on his LDS mission to Korea, so that makes a ton of sense now. I didn't know that, a little tidbit that I found as I was just kind of digging things up online, and pretty cool. I love that he's taken that culture that he's probably integrated himself into a little bit and kind of put that into some of his books and some of the culture of his characters in this world that he's building. Adian, one of the kids, what's his name? Uncle something? Uncle Kin's kids. High functioning autism, perhaps? Savant syndrome, perhaps? Feels like I'm getting a Rain Man vibe. Stood out, and I am curious to see. I feel like it's been mentioned in passing enough that something's going to come of that. So excited to follow through on that, or follow up on that. That's a lot of what I have for Sarene, except for in the Sarene chapters, there was something that stood out to me, maybe a little bit of a critique on writing style that I kind of wanted to talk about for just a second. I'm going to read the passage. Well, let me set the scene and then I'll read the passage. But basically what was happening was you have Iadon, or the king, who is getting angry with Sarene because Sarene's kind of doing her thing. She's setting up her art in his throne room. She's doing all these things, and he just thinks she's kind of a weird girl, and he gets really annoyed with her really quickly, and he has all these outbursts, and he dismisses her really easy, and he gets really frustrated, and basically chalks it up to her being, a silly girl and not worth his time. Sanderson does a fantastic job describing that whole scene. Really easy to follow, really visual, loved it. And then immediately after, he undercuts himself by putting that in the dialogue with Sarene, explaining that to her Seon. And the dialogue she says is, Iadon has a quick temper and grows frustrated with ease. You just showed this really, really well in your previous description of the scene. You don't need to spell it out in dialogue. Give your reader a little bit of credit to follow what you're building. Give yourself a little bit of credit that you painted the picture well enough that you don't have to hold my hand all the way through. Minor annoyance. It's happened on a couple of occasions. I feel like this is probably first novel syndrome. I don't remember feeling much of this as I read through Sanderson's Wheel of Time books, but I got a little bit annoyed a few times, even I rolled a few times of like, no man, you just did such a good job of doing this, don't spell it out for me. Have confidence in your own ability. So, little thing here and there. Again, I'm probably coming off as super hypercritical, but that's what this is about. So, let's jump to Hrathen real quick. Not much more to say than what I've already said with his interaction with Sarene. Deloff is like full Anakin Skywalker I hate you mode, like all the time. He feels a little one-dimensional right now. I think his character could be really cool. I think that he's going to go off the rails and do something crazy, whether it's kill Hrathen because he doesn't believe that Hrathen is devout enough or whatever. That could happen. I feel like he could even do something against whatever their plans are to like destroy Elantris or destroy the Elantrians, or Deloff at some point is going to undermine his master's work because of his fervor towards the religion. That's my thoughts, but yeah, getting super uber creepy vibes from that dude. And I thought something was interesting that came up in those Hrathen chapters about how the servants rebelled against the Elantrians after the transformation happened. I really like the subtle, well, maybe it's not super subtle, but I really like the way that there's the logical steps of how Elantris fell and how it's become the way that it is now after that transformation, and that the society that they live in now makes a lot of sense. That the merchants took over, they were the most powerful, that they were the ones that were kind of in direct contrast to the Elantrians, and so there was kind of that natural rising up of power, because if everybody believed in Elantris and all of a sudden Elantris is evil and cursed and whatever, naturally the opposite of whatever the hell happened there is now the good. And so I really like how that was described. I'm really interested to see, I think Hrathen I'm really interested to see the plots between Hrathen and Sarene and what they're going to do. He's kind of becoming, like, I know last week I think Sarene was my favorite. I think Sarene chapters are probably my favorite, but especially this time because there was a lot of interaction with Hrathen and what was going on there. He's kind of becoming my favorite character so far. He's the one I'm most looking forward to seeing what he's planning and what he's doing. So that's kind of my quick thoughts. Not quick, 24 minutes. Yeah, I suck at keeping this trim. So I'm gonna say what's on my mind. it's probably going to be 20-ish minutes per video now, especially if we're going to keep up at like a 6-chapter pace. So there's just a lot to cover. Hopefully it's okay. I know it probably sounds like the ramblings of a madman, but there they are. Take them for what they are. Hit me up in the comments. Send us an email response to the newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get these before anyone else. Follow the conversation on Reddit. I'll probably throw out tomorrow a question thread for what, if any of you have any questions or want me to look for certain things as I read through the next 6. So next week we should be 10 through 15, and we will go from there. So loving it so far. Really interested in a lot of the settings and a lot of the political intrigue and religious stuff going on. Have my beefs with a couple weird minor things here and there, but we'll see how we get through it. Yeah. Follow the podcast, follow us on Reddit, all that jazz. Thanks for watching.